So Jae-pil was 20, with Kim Ok-jeon being the oldest at 33. 33. All had spent some time in Japan. Pak Yong-hyo had been part of a mission sent to Japan to apologize for the IMO incident in 1882. 29. He had been accompanied by Seo Gwangbam and by Kim Ok-jeon, who later came under the influence of Japanese modernizers such as Fukuzawa Yukichi. Kim Ok-jeon, while studying in Japan, had also cultivated friendships with influential Japanese figures and became the de facto leader of the group. 33. They were also strongly nationalistic and desired to make their country truly independent by ending Chinese interference in Korea's internal affairs. 31. The Sadaedon was a group of conservatives, which included not only Min Young-ik from the Min family but also other prominent Korean political figures that wanted to maintain power with China's help. Although the members of the Sadaedon supported the Enlightenment policy, they favored gradual changes based on the Chinese model. 31. After the IMO incident, the Min clan pursued a pro-Chinese policy. This was also partly a matter of opportunism, as the intervention by Chinese troops led to subsequent exile of the rival Daewongun in Tianjin and the expansion of Chinese influence in Korea. But it also reflected an ideological disposition shared by many Koreans toward the more comfortable and traditional relationship as a tributary of China. 33. Consequently, the Min clan became advocates of the Dongdo Seogi, adopting Western knowledge while keeping Eastern values, philosophy, which had originated from ideas of moderate Chinese reformers who had emphasized the need to maintain the perceived superior cultural values and heritage. 15. Of the Sino-centric world while recognizing the importance of acquiring and adopting Western technology, particularly military technology, in order to preserve autonomy. Hence, rather than major institutional reforms such as the adoption of new values such as legal equality or introducing modern education like in Meiji Japan, the advocates of this school of thought sought piecemeal adoptions of institutions that would strengthen the state while preserving the basic social, political, and cultural order. 33. Through the ascendancy of Queen Min to the throne, the Min clan had also been able to use newly created government institutions as bases for political power. Subsequently, with their growing monopoly of key positions, they frustrated the ambitions of the Enlightenment Party. 33. Gaps in coup. In the 2 years preceding the IMO incident, the members of the Gawadon had failed to secure appointments to vital offices in the government and were unable to implement their reform plans. 34. As a consequence, they were prepared to seize power by any means necessary. In 1884, an opportunity to seize power by staging a coup d'état against the Sadaedon presented itself. In August, as hostilities between France and China erupted over Annam, half of the Chinese troops stationed in Korea were withdrawn. 34. On December 4, 1884, with the help of Japanese Minister Takezo Shinichio, who promised to mobilize Japanese legation guards to provide assistance, the reformers staged their coup under the guise of a banquet hosted by Hong Young-sik, the director of the General Postal Administration. The banquet was to celebrate the opening of the new National Post Office. 34. Kim Ga-hong was expected together with several foreign diplomats and high-ranking officials, most of whom were members of the pro-Chinese Sadaedon faction. Kim Ok-jeon and his comrades approached Kim Ga-hong falsely stating that Chinese troops had created a disturbance and escorted him to the small Gyeonggu Palace, where they placed him in the custody of Japanese legation guards. They then proceeded to kill and wound several senior officials of the Sadaedon faction. 34. After the coup, the Gawadon members formed a new government and devised a program of reform. The radical 14-point reform proposal stated that the following conditions be met: an end to Korea's tributary relationship with China, the abolition of ruling class privilege and the establishment of equal rights for all, the reorganization of the government as virtually a constitutional monarchy, their vision of land tax laws, cancellation of the grain loan system, the unification of all internal fiscal administrations under the jurisdiction of the Hojo, the suppression of privileged merchants, and the development of free commerce and trade, the creation of a modern police system including police patrols and royal guards, and severe punishment of corrupt officials. 34. However, the new government lasted no longer than a few days. 34. This was possibly inevitable, as the reformers were supported by no more than 140 Japanese troops who faced at least 1,500 Chinese garrisoned in Seoul. 34. Under the command of General Yuan Shikai. With the reform measures being a threat to her clan's power, Queen Min secretly requested military intervention from the Chinese. Consequently, within 3 days, even before the reform measures were made public, the coup was suppressed by Chinese troops who attacked and defeated the Japanese forces and restored power to the pro-Chinese Sadaedong faction. 34. During Theme's Wing Li Hongyang-sik was killed, the Japanese legation building was burned down and 40 Japanese were killed. The surviving Korean coup leaders including Kim Ok-jian escaped to the port of Kimulpo under escort of the Japanese minister Takezo. From there they boarded a Japanese ship for exile in Japan. 35. In January 1885, with a show of force the Japanese dispatched 2 battalions and 7 warships to Korea. 36. Which resulted in the Japan-Korea Treaty of 1885. Signed on the 9th of January, 1885. The treaty restored diplomatic relations between Japan and Korea. The Koreans also agreed to pay the Japanese 100,000 yen for damages to their legation. 36. And to provide a site for the building of a new legation. Prime Minister Ito Hirogumi, in order to overcome Japan's disadvantageous position in Korea followed by the abortive coup, visited China to discuss the matter with his Chinese counterpart, Li Hongjiang. The two parties succeeded in concluding the Convention of Tianjin on the 31st of May, 1885. They also pledged to withdraw their troops from Korea within 4 months, with prior notification to the other if troops were to be sent to Korea in the future. 36. After both countries withdrew their forces, they left behind a precarious balance of power on the Korean peninsula between the two nations. 36. Meanwhile, Yuan Shikai remained in Seoul appointed as the Chinese resident, and continued to interfere with Korean domestic politics. 36. The failure of the coup also marked a dramatic decline in Japanese influence over Korea. 37. Nagasaki Incident. The Nagasaki Incident was a riot that took place in the Japanese port city of Nagasaki in 1886. 4 warships from the Qing Empire's navy, the Ptiang fleet, stopped at Nagasaki, apparently to carry out repairs. Some Chinese sailors caused trouble in the city and started the riot. Several Japanese policemen confronting the rioters were killed. The Qing government did not apologize after the incident, which resulted in a wave of anti-Chinese sentiment in Japan. 38. Being controversy. A poor harvest in 1889 led the governor of Korea's Hamgyong province to prohibit soybean exports to Japan. Japan requested and received compensation in 1893 for their importers. The incident highlighted the growing dependence Japan felt on Korean food imports. 39. Prelude to the war. Kim Ok-jian affair. Kim Ok-jian photographed in Nagasaki in 1882. Hai's assassination in China would contribute to tensions leading to the First Sino-Japanese War. On the 28th of March, 1894, a pro-Japanese Korean revolutionary, Kim Ok-jian, was assassinated in Shanghai. Kim had fled to Japan after his involvement in the 1884 coup, and the Japanese had turned down Korean demands for him to be extradited. 40. Many Japanese activists saw in him potential for a future role in Korean modernization. However, Meiji government leaders were more cautious. After some reservations, they exiled him to the Bonin, Ogasawara Islands. Ultimately, he was lured to Shanghai, where he was killed by a Korean, Hong Jor-soo, in his room at a Japanese inn in the international settlement. After some hesitation, the British authorities in Shanghai concluded that rules against extradition did not apply to a corpse and turned his body over to Chinese authorities. His body was then taken aboard a Chinese warship and sent back to Korea, where it was cut up by the Korean authorities, quartered and displayed in all Korean provinces as a warning to other purported rebels and traitors. 41. In Tokyo, the Japanese government took that as an outrageous affront. 40. Kim Ok-jian's brutal murder was portrayed as a betrayal by Lee Hong-jong and a setback for Japan's stature and dignity. 40. The Chinese authorities refused to press charges against the assassin, and he was even allowed to accompany Kim's mutilated body back to Korea, where he was showered with rewards and honors. 42. Kim's assassination had also called Japan's commitment to its Korean supporters into question. The police in Tokyo had foiled an earlier attempt during the same year to assassinate Pak Yong-hyo, one of the other Korean leaders of the 1884 uprising. When two suspected Korean assassins received asylum at the Korean legation, that had instigated a diplomatic outrage as well. 42. Although the Japanese government could have immediately used Kim's assassination to its advantage, it concluded that since Kim had died on Chinese territory, the treatment of the corpse was outside its authority. 42. However, the shocking murder of the Korean inflamed Japanese opinion, since many Japanese considered the Chinese supported actions to be directed against Japan as well. To the Japanese, the Chinese had also showed their contempt for international law when they set free the suspected assassin who had been arrested by British authorities in Shanghai and then, in accordance with treaty obligations, turned over to the Chinese for trial. Nationalistic groups immediately began to call for war with China. 42. Donghak Rebellion. Tensions ran high between China and Japan, but war was not yet inevitable, and the fury in Japan over Kim's assassination began to dissipate. However, in late April, the Donghak Rebellion erupted in Korea. Korean peasants rose up in open rebellion against oppressive taxation and incompetent financial administration of the Joseon government. It was the largest peasant rebellion in Korean history. 43. However, on June 1st, rumors reached the Donghaks that the Chinese and Japanese were on the verge of sending troops, and so the rebels agreed to a ceasefire to remove any grounds for foreign intervention. 43. On June 2nd, the Japanese cabinet decided to send troops to Korea if China did the same. In May, the Chinese had taken steps to prepare for the mobilization of their forces in the provinces of Jilai, Shandong and in Manchuria as a result of the tense situation on the Korean peninsula. 44. However, those actions were planned more as an armed demonstration to strengthen the Chinese position in Korea than as preparation for war against Japan. 44. On June 3rd, Kim Ga-hong, on the recommendation of the Min clan and at the insistence of Yuan Shikai, requested aid from the Chinese government in suppressing the Donghak Rebellion. Although the rebellion was not as serious as it had initially seemed and so the Chinese forces were not necessary, the decision was made to send 2,500 men under the command of General Lee Jikeo to the harbor of Asan, about 70 kilometers, 43 mi, from Seoul. The troops destined for Korea sailed on board 3 British-owned steamers chartered by the Chinese government, arriving at Asan on June 9. On the 25th of June, a further 400 troops had arrived. Consequently, by the end of June, Yujiko had about 2,800 to 2,900 soldiers under his command at Aizen. 44-45. Closely watching the events on the peninsula, the Japanese government had quickly become convinced that the rebellion would lead to Chinese intervention in Korea. As a result, soon after learning of the Korean government's request for Chinese military help, all Japanese warships in the vicinity were immediately ordered to Pusan and Kimulpo. 44. By June the 9th, Japanese warships